And we are live. Joey, I'm going to drop this image for a sec. Hey, Joey, how you doing, mate?
Danny, I'm excited for episode 2 of Own Your Gifts. We got a special guest.
Yes, we do. Episode 2 of Own Your Gifts. I just want to welcome everybody who's tuning in today. Myself and Joey have a guest on our show today. The show is called Own Your Gifts. Joey and I share our experiences with gratitude and happiness. Today, we're going to share some of those hacks and tricks and tips around becoming a happier person. And I can't wait to hear from my good friend, Lucas Williams, who's up in Queensland. Joey, where are you coming in live from?
South Orange, New Jersey, USA.
Yeah. I want to get into that Netflix show. I'll be watching it again 7 seconds. But first of all, let me bring Lucas on screen, mate. Lucas, welcome, mate.
Yo, he's going.
Good. Lucas, before we get started, if I just ask all of our viewers, please let us know where you're watching from. You know, one of the things that I think is absolutely amazing and probably a product of this whole COVID mess is the ability for us to come in live from anywhere in the universe or in the globe anyway and connect live on social media. So please drop your comments where you're watching from. Today, Joey and Lucas and I are going to talk about just some stuff around gratitude and share our experiences. So, Lucas, it's wonderful to have you here, mate.
Thank you.
Where are you watching from?
I'm dropping in from Bundjalung Country, New South Wales, which is just a place called Casino, which is about an hour from the Queensland border as you cross over into Coolangatta. That's where I'm calling in from.
Awesome, mate. I'll be heading up there next month. Joey, How are you, mate?
I'm doing great. You know, I was welcome, Lucas. I'm excited to have a chat. I've been looking around on your website, and I've been giving a lot of thought today about when we decided to name our show "Own Your Gifts," and I was giving some thought today about like what are my gifts, and I think that's different for everybody. And I think, hopefully everybody will know a little bit more about us before the end of the show, but we walked a similar path where a lot of our pain and our trauma and our failures and our mistakes and our shortcomings today have become our most important gifts and our greatest strengths, because they help us to be of service to others and help others along the same path that we've walked. So I'd like to, if we can just one at a time, like talk a little bit about what Own Your Gifts means to you. How about you go, Lucas? What do you think?
Sure, man. It's a really interesting one. I have a nephew with me at the moment, actually, and he's going through recovery himself. And then I looked at Danny, what he put up on Facebook on the kind of bio about me, and it had up there about a warrior. And I guess I'm about, when we look at owning our gifts, I think about it from the perspective of we have gifts that are full of, I guess you could say, light and good things in life, but then we have gifts that build from a life of destruction. And going to a school when I was a young fellow, there was 2 Aboriginal kids. I didn't know what my gifts were back then. I was going to a school where I tried to fit into this area where I was seeing everybody else hold these gifts, but I was living in a country around people that didn't recognise the gifts that I had in the way of a warrior, which was what I mean by that is an Aboriginal warrior. And so going through life with a lot of not so good experiences, it took me 28 years to learn that all them not so good experiences were actually the gifts to me getting better and the gifts to me to be able to help other people. And a lot of them stories hold a lot of pain, but through them stories brings a lot of happiness to myself, to the people around me, because we can open up space for people that may have walked them same paths, and if they don't have the gift of other people to share these stories, well, then maybe they'll never reach a place for them to own their own gifts.
I love that, Danny. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts when you hear "Own Your Gifts"?
Thanks, Joey. It's wonderful to hear you then, Lucas. And I just want to share with you, Lucas, and everyone else. Joey wrote that bio and that introduction to the show. So, yeah, acknowledging you being a warrior, I think it was important that we mentioned that. When I hear that term only gives I think about like the madness of my very early days of recovery, like getting clean and learning to live this new way of life. Like one thing I discovered was that I don't have a problem with drugs anymore. I've got a problem with life and becoming aware of how to live life on life's terms and enjoy some of that stuff. Was incredible. And the things that they said to me in the early days, if you made a list of all the things you would want in 5 years' time, you'd be selling yourself short. And I got that at 5 years' time. What I realized was all those material things that I wanted and were important weren't the gifts. It was that internal peace, this like serenity, gratitude, and a spiritual connection. Those are the most three powerful things that I've ever experienced. And that's the stuff that really keeps me going. So, yeah, my gifts come in that form. It's a sense of liking myself, loving myself, even if you want to be extreme. But peace and serenity, I think that's where the real gold in life is, mate. What about you, Joey?
I mean, when I hear the words peace and serenity, and I think of, my life pre-recovery, and even through the first 5 years of my recovery, I didn't have an ounce of peace even before I picked up a drink or a drug. I always felt really uncomfortable in my own skin. I felt other than, I felt less than, without any legitimate reasons for that, other than, I think a lot of problems with, inner conflicts really is about a war on judgment. So it's like judging myself, like comparing my inside with other people's outsides and not having the tools to be able to communicate. And peace, serenity, no idea what that meant. No idea what it felt like. If someone told me about it, I couldn't even comprehend it. And, fast forward, I got sober in 2009 and, the first 5 years of my sobriety were rough. And I really like to hear a little bit about Lucas's story, because based on the video that I saw with him, he had a sudden upheaval, like a spiritual awakening, like woke with, with the determination and knowing where to go. That wasn't my story. Mine was, when they removed the alcohols and drugs, I got a lot sicker before I got any better. But I will say that with consistency and persistency and continuing to, step outside of my comfort zone and remember that the most important thing is that I'm of service to others and I get outside myself in that way. The truth is I'm at peace most of the time. And, talk about a spiritual awakening. To me, that's like the seas parting. That's like, walking on water or the burning bush, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, I mean, it's I don't wake up that way all the time, and I'm certainly not that way all the time, but I'm at peace most of the time. And I think a lot of that has to do with like me living in integrity, like me doing what I say I'm going to do. So, yeah, I mean, if there is a purpose for life, that has to be it. So I'd really like to, hear your views on that, Lucas, because I know that your recovery was slightly different, and you're also coming from a different background. I mean, we were both we all use and abuse drugs and people, and we all were victims of circumstances and other types of things. But our journey of recovery are significantly different. So,
for sure.
About like what happened that night before you decided that you were going to get sober and walk a life like this and commit it to being of service to others?
Yeah, definitely. It's a night that I'll never forget. I'd been living in destruction for, 15 or 20 years using ice, anything I could get my hands on, but my main drug was ice and speed. And I'd been going through psychosis for probably about 3 months solid. And I'd was entering this place where I thought I was hearing voices, and I thought, things were going wrong for me, and I was going into the mental health wards, and they all thought I was crazy, and so on. And keeping in mind that I'm an Aboriginal man from Australia, and there's a lot of disconnection within our family. And then at that time, I'd went to one of my cousins, and I'd sat with him and said, look, I'm hearing all this stuff, and all these things are coming to me, and everyone thinks I'm mad. And he said, brother, you're not mad. He said, that is your ancestors speaking to you, and you need to listen to them. So I went off and I continued to use. And it was on the 2nd of January 2012. The first I'd used for the last time in my life, because I'll never use again. And I remember that I laid down to go to sleep, and I didn't really put in the video this way, but I'm going to talk it here this way, because I know I hear a lot of men, a lot of women talk, and they don't want to talk their story because it might sound a bit silly. But I remember that I was in this bed, and I couldn't move, and I laid down at about 9 o'clock, and I had things on the wall coming out on me. I could hear birds outside, like heaps and heaps of them, and I went into such a place of fear. And I'd done a lot of violence to people over the years, very bad violence, and all their faces had come back to me throughout that night. And it was kind of like that I got broken down, showed what I'd done to people, and I was forced into a place where I had to make a decision that I am now going to, basically, if we look at that word gifts, I'm going to use the gifts that I possess and that I have, and I'm going to travel across Australia and help other people. And then the next morning I woke up and I walked outside. I went to the beach, and it was like I seen the clouds for the first time in my life. At 28 years old, I looked up, and it was like they were speaking to me, and I was like, my God, where have I been? Like, what's been happening with me? And it was there that my life changed, and it was there that I made a commitment that I'm going to travel, and I'm going to sit with other people that have these similar stories. And I wouldn't say help heal them, because I think everyone has the capacity to heal themselves. It's a matter of sitting there and listening to the stories with people. And as I started to unpack my own story, it was the impacts of trauma in my life that why I used drugs. I didn't know how to function without drugs. I didn't know what the feelings of love or sadness or hurt. I didn't know how to distinguish them feelings or name them. All I had was rage. And if anyone got in that rage, well, then they were in my sight, and they'd be my target. And that was the sad reality that I was living in. And I had to, number one thing was actually dealing with a lot of my anger and rage at the beginning of my recovery, because it was my rage that would lead me to drugs. It was my rage that would hurt people. It was my rage that would trigger me back into using again. And it was all them not so good experiences that happened to me as I grew up a child. And it was the disconnection from culture. And I think, to go a bit further, when I say the disconnection to culture, I don't see that as just something for Aboriginal people. I see that something for all people, because I've walked into a room many times and I've said, where do you come from? Where is your ancestry from? And a lot of the times you have your Aboriginal mob that might say, I'm not sure, or I do know. But a lot of the time I hear our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters actually can't pinpoint exactly where they come from. They call themselves Australians, which we are all Australians, but I think there's a disconnection for all people when we don't know where we come from, and that can lead to using drugs and alcohol.
It's powerful, eh, Joey? When I hear that coming from Lucas, I love that. One of the things I truly love about you is that connection you have with yourself and home, I guess, Lucas. Can I just share also too that Joe, and I just want to let you know this, Joey. Like Lucas, I spent a little bit of time with Lucas in two different locations, and he is the calmest guy. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, Lucas, but I feel like Lucas has got a level of calm that I've never experienced in anybody. And he was such a pleasure to spend a few days with as well, because there was a few interactions that were going on that I just seen this real, and I don't know if it's inner peace, but what appeared to be inner peace about you and a warm, kind glow about you, mate. So I absolutely adore that, and I think that is you are someone who I aspire to be more like, Lucas. I truly mean that, bro.
Thank you, brother. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
and sorry, let me just share one little other story with this. I was invited by Lucas, and we're going to talk a little more about Ghana Healing, the organisation he runs. But I was invited into a remote Aboriginal community in Alice Springs. Sorry, Lucas. Oh, Santa Teresa, absolutely
That's
amazing.
it.
And Lucas and I'm just going to put this. Look at this image, Joey. This is me, Lucas, and a bunch of men
I love it.
connecting around. What? Tell us a bit more about that, Lucas. What was that night that we were doing there?
So we went out and done basically a healing circle, and it was a place where men could come and come into a calm place, a soft place, a place of listening, which is what Ghana means. It means to listen, to understand, to feel, to think, to understand. And so, yeah, we opened that space to allow the men to come in and yarn. And yarn, for people that might be in America, yarn means to talk, to have a conversation. But in our terms, Aboriginal way, that's what that means for us. We'll go, oh, let's go for a yarn. That means let's go down and have a yarn and have a talk. And that's what we're doing. We're sitting down talking about serious issues that us men may go through. And Danny come out. And Danny is the first man I've ever took with me to a community. And they absolutely loved him. And he got the pleasure. He got the amazing job of actually having to prepare kangaroo tails. And that job isn't just given to anyone. Mob's got to like you. Otherwise, you just sit over there on the bench and you just be quiet and wait till it's finished. But Danny got the opportunity to get in there and help out. It was just great. Yeah.
Crazy.
And just thinking about you talking about me being calm, Danny. Once upon a time, that calmness was never there. It was never there, and it was about actually going in to talk about and really digging in deep to talk about, my experience of sexual assault against me. I watched my mother get run over in a car by my father. I'd watched many things happen in my life that created this rage. And when I found myself going in to deal with them things and start to talk about them, I then started to become a calmer person, and I could understand myself a lot better, which allowed me to sit in spaces to hear other people speak in them calm areas. So it's been a rocky road, a journey to reach that place. And yeah, you probably wouldn't want to see me on my bad days. No, joking. Because I have them bad days. I have them days. I think we're human and we go through that, but it's how we deal with it and how we display it to our people.
I'm sure you were on your best behavior, Lucas, but it doesn't matter. Like you and I and Joe, we can pick this stuff in people, and it doesn't matter. I could tell a sense of underlying calmness, like almost like no other for me,
Yeah, cool. Thanks,
Joey.
Yeah, I can really relate to. I think the anger and violence and rage was my first drug. And, for the most part, I played, physical contact sports, and that was a really good outlet for me. Because what I could get away with on the football field or in the ice hockey rink would probably land most people in jail if they were out in the public. But there were always incidents, outside of that where I hurt people. I hurt a lot of people physically, and I hurt them bad. And I never understood where that rage came from. And this was as a youth, like even under 10, 11, 12, like that was how I expressed what I know to be now as for me, it was anger for being born. I don't know why. I didn't have the level of abuse that you're describing. Lucas, that you had to come up against. I always felt safe in my home. I always had a lot of friends and family and people who wanted to be around me. There was stuff that went down, within the family that doesn't seem like I don't think I would call it trauma, but yet, I had the same feelings associated with somebody who went through trauma like that, which kind of leads me to believe that I may have entered the world that way. You mentioned when you went that Ghana means to listen. And I had to learn to listen to other people, and I had to learn to identify and listen, identify the two voices in my head. There's a lower nature and there's a higher nature, and they're both sweet. They're both speaking. And I needed to be able to identify and label that voice in my head that felt like I was unworthy or I wasn't enough. And so it's like that lower nature is like most things. I think most things grow in light, right? But our lower nature grows in the dark. And by bringing it out into the light, it kills it. So, through conversation, through, communication, through getting vulnerable with other people. And I didn't know how to do any of that until I got to recovery, well into recovery. And still, to this day, when I need to really, let people in and, and let them know who I am and what's going on between my ears. It's a leap of faith. It feels like a major risk for me every time I do it. So it doesn't come second nature to me. These are all tools that I learned in recovery, and mostly out of necessity and desperation. I usually don't do much until I'm in a lot of pain, which is why I think some of our pain are in fact our greatest gifts, because it allows us to step outside of our comfort zone and turn towards the light and bring, let people in past arm's length where I've kept everybody my entire life. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to share one more thing that came to mind when you said that when you picture when you had that spiritual experience when you thought you were going crazy, but in reality, a mentor or advisor or relative has said to you, like, these are your ancestors communicating with you. And, I had a similar experience when I was about 6 years sober. And I remember the date. It was March 1st, 2015. And what my life had looked like leading up to that point was I was sober. I was not drinking or drugging, but I had switched behaviors. I had turned to food, and I was killing myself with food. So when I got sober in 2009 to 2015, I went from 220 to 415 pounds, and I was engaged in a program of recovery and on a daily basis, consistently. I was being of service to others, and I was really sick. I was sicker than I was when I got into recovery, which was I had a $300 a day heroin habit. I was living on the streets. I was doing desperate things for drugs. I was certainly hurting everybody around me. I had pushed everybody away from me that were important to me, and I had a dream, and where I was visited by my grandfather and my deceased grandfather, and it was very intense because since he had passed, that had never happened to me before. And in the dream, he was screaming at me, intensely screaming at me. And this was a man who never raised his voice. I never heard him raise his voice in 30 plus years of my life, never once. And he was screaming at me, "He who isn't busy being born is busy dying. He who isn't busy being born is busy dying," frantically screaming at me. And when I woke up, for first, I thought about that, and it wasn't the first time I heard it. It turns out to be a lyric in a song. However, it did impact me a whole lot differently. And what I had realized is I was never scared to die. I was scared to truly live. And I woke up that day committed to start living. Instead of just barely surviving, I was going to start thriving. I was going to start to learn to be gentle with myself. I started to eat healthier. I started to exercise more. I started to let more people in. And it was sudden. It was really sudden. I can say that I had 5 or 6 years of recovery, and it was like one of the slower, painful natures. And perhaps it was, little tiny steps over and over and over again that had built up to that moment. But it was, it was I haven't looked back since then. It's like I'm not scared to live anymore. I'm not scared to step out of my comfort zone. I don't need to hide. And so that was kind of like my spiritual experience. I mean, I didn't really have one in the, through my recovery work. I mean, that's really hard to say. It's like, it really depends on what a spiritual experience is. Like me not drinking and using drugs, that's a miracle. I had nothing to do with it. And I might have done some stuff, but that happened. That pretty much happened on its own. So that's certainly a spiritual experience. But this one was different because I still didn't have any desire to live at that point. So that's kind of interesting. That's what your story made me think of. How about you, Dan? Do you have a spiritual experience? What's your idea of a spiritual experience?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different to what you two have suggested. And I think it's really important. I don't actually think that my experience was like that. When I talk about that, a spiritual awakening type of thing, I don't like, I used to hear this thing about, certainly when you talk about God and stuff like seeing the light, I used to think that's how it looked. And it sounds like a little bit like what you have gone. For me, my spiritual awakening was sort of the day my spirit woke up, when I became connected with the universe, connected with the moon, actually. I remember the day very clearly. I was about 10 months off all the drinks and the drugs, and I was walking home and I just felt connected to the universe. That was kind of my experience. But I did have times there in my recovery where I was right at the bottom. There was one time I was in Europe. I was walking around Europe, roaming Germany, surrounded by a heap of drugs and gambling establishments, and I knew, and I was in the horrors as well. I was actually crying, and I thought, if I pick up, I'm never going to make it back to Australia, and my life is sort of over. And that was another kind of spiritual awakening, making it back home, getting through that process. Kind of made me a little bit stronger, So I think it's like a connection to the universe for me. Yeah, it's cool.
And
I love it.
All right, to jump in here, Danny.
Yeah, go, Luke.
I want to talking about spiritual experiences. I want to talk a little bit about how that experience of mine is a little bit different to the spiritual experiences I have in life today.
Yes.
So, in the non-Indigenous world, we might hear this part here is our third eye. But in our world, Aboriginal world, I call that the door to law. And when I say the door to law, it's LORE, which means the law to our culture. And when I practice ceremony or I practice our culture in a deep way, there's a vibration that takes place, and it generates my brain that must kick off intergenerational healing and wisdom that comes from 60 and 30, 40, 50, 60,000 years ago. So it all gets generated. And that what we call in non-Indigenous world, the third eye, but our door to law, it's like I go into this other world, and I go into this thing that we call mindfulness, Indigenous mindfulness. And we start to see things not just from our eyes, but also from our hearts and from our door, from the door of law. We feel things that are very special. And so that is one of my biggest spiritual experiences in life today, is when I practice my culture in a deep way. Not just practice my culture in town, when I go out bush and I practice my culture the right way. I go through such a big, I guess, transformation that sometimes it actually brings me to wobbly knees and tears in my eyes because of how soft it makes me feel and how beautiful it makes me feel, and how much I missed out on when I was a young fella and when I was a young kid, because that was a lot of that was not lost, but it wasn't available for me because we hadn't lived around it. So today in life, that would be my number one spiritual experience.
I have a question about that. It's really fascinating to me. So, like, what we're talking about here is we're talking about a higher power. We're talking about energy. It's out there for all of us to be able to plug into. So when you practice your culture fully, like, how do you plug into that? How do you plug into your ancestors' wisdom or that higher force or that energy? Is it ritualistic? Is it simply just being in nature? Are there things that things that you're doing that help you plug into that? Because I can't imagine that it's like a snap of the fingers, right?
Yeah, no, I think I believe it's a connection with our ancestors. If we've got drugs and alcohol in our systems, I believe that connection and that wisdom will not be there. You know, it might be there in a very slight way, but it won't be there for us to access in a deep way. There was this old lady from Canada that an Indigenous lady, she said, for us to be given the gifts of our culture and ceremony and wisdom, one must walk in a straight line to access that. And I think that when I walk in my integrity, that means I've got to walk in a straight line. And in my stomach, my heart, my whole being, we look at Mother Earth as the earth, and we look at the sky as Father Sky. And we are just connected to that as one whole evolving system. And so when we step into a healing process, I think that it's just taken place within so many generations before us, that the brains, the amygdala systems and all them areas in the brain, it kicks into a place where it remembers, and off we go into ceremony. Now, there's many things that we've got to do to actually enter into some of these places, and it's a cultural thing, and a lot of them things wouldn't just get talked about like on here or in town or whatever, but there is a lot of things that actually happens prior to entering into these places, and for us to enter into this deepness of our culture in the way of ceremony, for us to go into that deeper level. But I think that we are just one with the earth, and when we walk that line and we feel that, it just happens automatically. And if you have 20 people that are walking that line, well, then, they say that people go to church, and when they sing, the vibration comes in the church. Not that I go to church, but I guess it could be looked at from that point of view. Everyone has them different views. And I know that all I've got to do is hear a couple of uncles start to sing, and I instantly go into mindfulness, and I instantly go into deep listening. And I'm a little boy and I do not speak. I'm just here to listen. I'm here to learn. So basically, I'm being a good boy, like I'm there with respect, and it's taking me into another place until I'm given the right to be able to then start to talk or whatever I'm going to do. There's so much to it, brother.
And I felt that with you too, Lucas. Like I remember feeling you talk about those vibrations, but like I feel that in your presence, man. It's so powerful, that connection you have with going into those communities and just that calm. That's what it is I was talking about before. I think it's those vibrations that come. Yeah, it's hard to explain in words actually, but that's part of what I was saying earlier that I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what I'd love to do is share with our audience and with one another, like a tip to becoming a happier, more grateful person, Lucas. You got like have a think about about that? Like, is there one thing, like, to be honest, like, I've got this bit of a tool bag, yeah, of things that I use on a daily basis. And there's quite a few things that I practice on a regular basis that I truly believe increase my levels of happiness. You know, they're the stuff that help keep me clean and serene. I don't know if you've got any tip you can share with the audience. What about you, Joey? Have you got something you could share with us today about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly what I think, it reminded me when Lucas was talking is he mentioned the word remembering. So, which is like, I think, how I evolve as a person and how I recover and heal is a lot more about unlearning, and shedding and removing blocks, like you said, presence and living clean, connecting with the earth. Everything's just there. I just need to remove blocks. And what I find is the biggest block for me is my head. So, like, trying to figure things out, like for me, like it's about me connecting with a higher force or my higher power. And the most important thing I like try to do is stay out of the debate of what that looks like. Like, and I don't need to name it. I don't need to know what it looks like. I got to just not be trying to figure it out. So, like, that's the first thing for me, that really keeps me connected to the truth, and out of the way, essentially, out of the way from what is always there and available to me and wanting to give to me if I would just clear out the blockage. As far as, I was thinking a lot about, and you use this term a lot, Danny, is like, hey, just be kind. And I was thinking today is I got a gift, I'm always getting gifts, but I recently, I had a family member who got sick, and I put up a GoFundMe, and with minimal expectations, and which is way out of my comfort zone, because nobody asked for help, to try to raise money for my brother. And what had happened over the course of 48 hours had completely blown my mind. People came and gave their time, gave their energy, gave their resources, gave their prayers, gave their good attitudes, and gave their money. And we were able to raise 3 times the amount of the goal in 48 hours. And I was like, just blown away about the goodness in the world. And so I was thinking this morning, I'm like, what can I do? Like, and I thought of random act of kindness. And so, like, that's my tip to today, is to anybody who's listening or watching, is to, within the next 24 hours, go out and perform a random act of kindness. You don't need to build a children's hospital. It doesn't need to be something big. It could be just, what I was thinking of is sometimes when you're in the line at a drive-through, like, I don't know if you guys have Starbucks in Australia, but like, the person in front of you pays for your coffee, like something like that. Or, another thought that I had was, if you're in the street or in a public place and you see somebody who looks really alone and sad, just take a minute or two and go up to him and ask him how he's doing, and introduce yourself to him. So that's my tip for this week.
Fantastic, Joey. What about you, Lucas? You got something?
Yeah, I've got 2 things, brother. Just hearing Joey talk about the mind, I lived so long in the mind, and one of the things that I guess for advice to increase happiness and gratitude, definitely happiness, is I wanted to not just I didn't just want to learn this education on about to heal my mind. I needed to match it with a visualization. And one of the things that kept me in my mind is I didn't understand my mind. And if we look at our mind here, as this is our area in the middle of our brain, our emotional brain, and if we named that the smoke alarm, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start to look outside my brain and start to learn how many bushfires outside of my body, is continuing to go on, and why is my smoke alarm continuing to go off? And I had to visualize that for so many years so I could start to put the fires out in my life so my brain can start to heal properly, which would help me stop having the head miles. And so I wanted to learn everything about the brain, you know, like the if we look at the brain stem, you know, you look at that, it's touch, it's sensory, it's about it's to do with our you know, our body heat and all sorts of things. So when I got to this point about learning about my body, I started to actually link it to my brain and what I needed to do in life to actually heal myself. And there's many techniques for us to heal our brain that would heal our body, that can increase our happiness. But as I went into 2021 this year, I would often help people in life. And when those people may have not done so well, I used to get affected by it, as though, or they'd stop talking to me, or they, you know, they didn't appreciate it, or whatever it is, I'd lose this sense of happiness. And so I went into 2021 this year, and I made a decision, well, I made a deal with myself that I'm going to help people that come into my life that want that help. And I don't care what their response is down the track or what happens. I'm just going to be happy that I helped. And the amount of happiness that's gave me with a few different situations has been it's been a different year for me to do that. And there's a few episodes that has happened to me this year, and for a day I've sat angry, and then and then it's clicked in about my thing that I'd actually agreed on with myself this year. I went, hang on, I actually said I'm going to help people this year and not take on or not be upset if they're not doing what I think they should be. And instantly I reach a place of happiness. So yeah, we're out there helping family and helping people. Remember that we can't fix everyone, but we can give people happiness for a day or two, or whatever that might look like. And we can't be affected if they don't make it. We can just hope that they do.
Thanks. Lucas. I love that. Such powerful stuff. And Joey, you talked about kindness. As you know, it's I guess all my levels of happiness often revolves around that kindness. And you've kind of taken all the good stuff already. But
I got a couple more for you. You can steal it.
Yeah, I've got a couple, but right that haven't been mentioned. Now, did you know, like, and it's such an old time thing, is the gratitude list. Did you know that when you write, let's say 5 things that you're grateful for, and this is such an important tool for someone in recovery, but also just for someone in life. You know, when we write a gratitude list, let's say 5 things that we're grateful for on paper, right? You can increase your levels of happiness, they say, by up to 4%, just by acknowledging that thing on paper. But even more important, and this is where the gold is, when we express our gratitude in person, on the phone, or even in a message to somebody who has had an impact, a positive impact on our life, they reckon you can skyrocket your level of happiness by up to 19% when you let somebody know that you're thankful for the impact that they've had on your life. I think that's something that it's something I do every single day, mind you. Okay, I always acknowledge the good things I see in other people, even if it is just that person at the coffee shop, someone in the street, someone at the gym, my brother, my mum. It's important to keep. Even if you've complimented that person 5 times before, do it again. It feels good. It feels good for them, even more importantly, you know. And the second one would be just to say hi. You know, like, not enough people, you know, and I know this, like, I don't know about you, Joey, but I know in Australia, in different towns, there's different levels of niceness. You know, like up in Queensland, for example, right? I find that people are more friendly, okay? I've got my own theory around that. I think Sydney's probably just a bit more bunched up and people get in their own heads. But I think just a smile and a hello to some random stranger in the street can have a massive impact on my spirit. And also, it's been said to me many times, you know, Danny, when you come up to me in my early days of recovery and you welcomed me and you said hi, it meant a lot. So I know that for a fact, mate. So that's my couple of tips.
Beautiful. I love that.
Hey, Lucas, we're getting carried away with timing. Please let us know first of all, before we get going. You run an organization called Ghana. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Sure, man.
Yeah. Put the website up here.
Yeah, cool. So Ghana Healing is a Aboriginal organisation that was established in around about, I think it was 2014, 2014 or so. And how that come about was that my grandmother was somebody that was removed at birth and put into a foster care home with non-Indigenous people. And we know that through our family members, we experienced such deep levels of trauma that we didn't know how to recover from some of them experiences, intergenerational experiences, intergenerational trauma, the experiences that we're actually even passing down to our families in our life today. And then we started to do our own healing and different things. And along come this day, I just thought we need to start to do this with other people. You know, like it was reaching that point now that I'd looked across our country and I've seen the continuous of what we call colonisation for our people. And that if we don't start to deal with some of them impacts, basically the wheel will continue to turn and the trauma will just continue to be laid over into the next generations. And so so we did that, and we now travel across Australia doing basically trauma informed. But when I say informed, it's more than informed. It's about also moving into an experience of how do we unpack trauma now that we learnt about trauma. You know, everyone can be informed about something, but how do we use these tools with our people, Aboriginal people, to actually start to unpack some of that trauma that sits in the body and the brain? How do we start to defrag some of them experiences and start to fill up them experiences with good experiences in life and new experiences? And so we travel mainly remote communities. So at the moment now, Ghana Healing is across every single remote community in the north, in Central Australia. As of yesterday, we've just another 6 communities have come on board with us, and so it just continues to spread. And we go in and we do traditional healing circles, and we start to unpack some of them not so good experiences. And it's not just as easy as just going, you know, we're going to go in and we're going to have a talk and we're going to sit in a circle. There's a lot of preparation that takes place prior. There's a lot of making sure things are safe. There's a lot of making sure that the right people are involved. There's a lot of making sure that, you know, the women and the men have their own spaces as well in these spaces, and that we don't just drop into the story too deep where people get fearful and don't want to come back. We need to move. As Annie Miriam Rose said, Annie Miriam is a lady from the Daly River, and she talks about the word of Datiri, which is where Ghana comes from. You know, that also means deep listening. And she talks about we must move with the current. You know, we can't swim upstream basically because it's just going to be too difficult. So we need to move with the current when we go into community with people, and we need to make sure that when we enter these places that we are not the experts. Our mob that we're going into, they are the experts. They have their own healing techniques, their own way of healing. All we're doing is basically stepping in to start to generate some conversations and starting to create some safe places, really. And I'm a big talker about, I don't know how many times, you know, like I've got a master's, I've got a degree, doing a PhD, and you hear a lot of academics speak in unis, and people, you know, well, yeah, I do say people perceive that they hold so much knowledge, but I've never ever seen anyone hold so much knowledge than an Aboriginal man that lives out in the desert that has lived a life of healing himself. And then when I've sat down and listened, or an Aboriginal woman, and you listen to some of the knowledge that is there outweighs any university degree. And it's like a year's training, a year's education, just sitting there for a week. So our people have the wisdom and the spirit to heal. And we need to just believe that and go in there and not act as the professionals or the experts, but kind of just sitting with mob and talking stories and about how we unpack them stories that aren't, because a lot of these stories are filled with a bucket of grief, loss, sadness, hurt, whatever the word is that we can throw in there. And it just continues to fill up with the life's experiences today. and we need to go in and see how we start to lift the things out of that bucket so it can start to be emptied, so we can live a more healthier life along beside. Sorry, alarm just went off there. Along beside our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters in Australia. So that's our mission. Our mission is to basically, well, you know, one of our goals is to improve the social emotional well-being of Aboriginal people, so that we can walk beside non-Indigenous people in the same way that all Australians should be able to walk in this country. And unfortunately for our people, that is not the case at the moment. But I try to do everything in my power to do that in a way that's not activism, it's not arguing, it's not fighting, but it's healing. And that's, I guess, our goal. Yeah.
Thanks so much, because you're an inspiration, mate, and I truly mean that. Like, I've watched you grow and grow, and we've had discussions around where you're going, and I get motivated, and I love to learn from you, mate. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if anyone wants to contact you, where would they contact you?
So you can contact me on that website.
Yeah.
You can also contact me on my email, which is director.garner@gmail.com. Or you can ring me on 045555 8625. But don't prank me. No. Make sure if you're ring up.
That might be.
Yeah. So. Hey.
Thanks, man. Hey, Lucas, I made a comment to you on Facebook about it's going to be a cracker of an episode having you on, and Joey was paid out. You don't know that term, Joey? A cracker? Like it's going to be a cracker?
I haven't, but like I said in the comment, I'm like, it sounds fun and exciting for me, so I'm into it. A cracker to me is something that you eat.
Fireworks, firecracker.
Is that like a banger?
Yeah,
like a banger. All right, yeah, I'm into it. That's we did it tonight, man. This is definitely a cracker tonight.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
A little bit another one.
Sorry, Joey. Anything else you want to mention before we head off?
I just really would like to thank Lucas and obviously thank you, Danny, for connecting and for allowing us to use your platform to impact people's lives and for our continued growing relationship. And anybody who's watching here, thank them for participating. And Lucas, please, if there's anything I could do to help your mission in any way, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll make sure that I reach out and to you via email and via your website so we can be connected and hopefully continue to help ourselves grow and other people's grow.
Yeah. Connect. Guys, all right, guys, hang on the platform. We'll just say goodbye. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week.
See you later.